The old wrought iron gates creaked in the night wind as Oliver Chapman stepped into Raven's Hollow Cemetery. The weathered tombstones cast long shadows across the overgrown grass, their engravings eroded by decades of neglect. Oliver pulled his coat tighter, a chill running down his spine that had little to do with the cool autumn air. He was here to find answers about his sister Lily's disappearance 20 years ago. The police had long since given up, but the mystery haunted Oliver. Lily had been fascinated by the occult and was last seen heading into these very woods to visit the cemetery on Halloween night. She never returned. Now, on the anniversary of her vanishing, Oliver finally mustered the courage to investigate the last place she was seen alive. Stepping carefully through the cemetery, he examined headstones for any clue to what happened that fateful night. Leaves crunched under his feet, each step seeming to disturb the slumbering dead. Oliver froze when he heard a twig snap behind him. He whirled around but saw only darkness between the gnarled tree trunks. His heart raced as he sensed someone, or something, watching him from the shadows. "Who's there?" Oliver called, his voice sounding small amidst the rows of graves. No response came. Unnerved, he pressed deeper into the cemetery, drawn toward the back corner where the oldest and most weathered stones lay. Kneeling, Oliver brushed lichen from a toppled obelisk, revealing a strange symbol carved into the rock. It seemed to match a pendant Lily always wore, though this carving looked ancient. Oliver jumped as a blood-curdling scream cut through the night. It sounded like a woman's voice, coming from the forest behind the graveyard. Then it cut off abruptly. Rising slowly, every hair on Oliver's neck stood on end. He knew following the scream deeper into the woods was foolhardy, but he had to find out if it had any connection to Lily. The police would take too long to arrive. With trembling hands, Oliver withdrew a flashlight from his coat and headed into the trees. Brambles clawed at his legs as he raced toward where the scream originated. The woods grew thicker, blotting out the moonlight. Oliver skidded to a halt in a small clearing. His flashlight fell upon a horrific scene, an ancient stone altar stained with dark splotches that looked all too much like blood. Symbols matching the ones from the cemetery were etched across its surface. And on the ground in front of the altar, a woman's shoe lay abandoned, the heel broken as if she was dragged away. Oliver's blood ran cold as he stared at the shoe, a sense of dread washing over him. He knew he should turn back, but he couldn't leave without finding out if the woman was all right. Against his better judgment, he pressed on into the forest. The trees seemed to close in around him, their branches reaching out like grasping fingers. Oliver's flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing twisted shapes that seemed to writhe in the shadows. He tried to convince himself it was just his imagination playing tricks, but deep down, he knew there was something sinister at work. As he pushed deeper into the woods, Oliver stumbled upon a hidden path, barely visible beneath the undergrowth. The trail was lined with ancient stone markers, each carved with the same unsettling symbols he had seen on the altar and in the cemetery. The path led to a clearing where stood a crumbling mausoleum, its door slightly ajar. Oliver's heart pounded as he approached, his hand trembling as he pushed the door open with a creak that echoed through the night. Inside, the air was thick with the stench of decay. Oliver's flashlight illuminated a scene of horror, bones and rotting remains scattered across the floor, remnants of decayed burial shrouds hanging from the walls. And there, in the center of the room, stood a hooded figure hunched over a stone sarcophagus. The figure turned slowly, its face obscured beneath a tattered black cowl. In its gnarled hands, it clutched a familiar pendant, the same one Lily had always worn. Oliver's heart stopped as the figure spoke in a rasping whisper. "Ah, the brother returns, just as she said you would." With mounting horror, Oliver realized the figure was wearing Lily's tattered jacket, stained with what looked like old bloodstains. The figure stepped forward, lowering its hood to reveal the gaunt, pale face of a woman, her eyes gleaming with an otherworldly light. "What have you done with Lily?" Oliver demanded, his voice shaking. The woman laughed, a sound like dead leaves skittering across a tomb. "Lily is with us now. She has joined the ranks of the forgotten, the abandoned souls who linger in the space between life and death. And soon, dear brother, so shall you." She raised a gnarled hand, and Oliver felt an unseen force slam into his chest, driving the breath from his lungs. He collapsed to the ground, gasping for air as the room spun around him. The last thing he saw before darkness claimed him was the woman's face, twisted in a grotesque mockery of his sister's features. Oliver awoke to find himself lying atop a stone sarcophagus, his hands and feet bound with frayed rope. The hooded figure loomed over him, chanting in a language he could not understand. Around them, the mausoleum was filled with more robed figures, their faces obscured beneath dark hoods. As the chanting reached a crescendo, Oliver felt a searing pain in his chest. He looked down to see a glowing symbol carved into his flesh, the same mark he had seen on the altar and the tombstones. The world began to fade away, his consciousness slipping into a void of endless darkness. The last thing Oliver heard was his sister's voice, whispering in his ear, "Welcome home, brother. We've been waiting for you." Oliver's mind reeled as he struggled against the bonds that held him to the sarcophagus. The chanting of the hooded figures grew louder, their voices rising in a discordant chorus that seemed to echo from beyond the grave. He could feel an unnatural cold seeping into his bones, as if the very essence of death itself was claiming him. Through the haze of pain and fear, Oliver's thoughts raced. He refused to believe that Lily was truly lost, that she had willingly succumbed to this twisted cult. With a burst of desperate strength, he wrenched one hand free from the ropes, ignoring the searing pain as the rough fibers tore at his skin. Grabbing a jagged piece of stone from the crumbling sarcophagus, Oliver lashed out at the nearest robed figure. The stone connected with a sickening crunch, and the figure crumpled to the ground. The chanting faltered as the others turned to face him, their eyes glinting with malevolent hunger. Oliver fought like a man possessed, wielding the stone like a weapon as he fended off the advancing horde. The mausoleum became a whirlwind of flailing limbs and unearthly shrieks, the air thick with the coppery scent of blood. But for every robed figure he struck down, another seemed to take its place, their grasping hands clawing at his flesh. Just as Oliver felt his strength beginning to fail, a blinding light filled the room. The robed figures recoiled, hissing like serpents as they shielded their eyes. Through the glare, Oliver saw a familiar figure standing in the doorway, Lily, her face pale but determined, a flickering torch clutched in her hand. "Oliver, run," she screamed, her voice cutting through the chaos. "I'll hold them off." Oliver hesitated, torn between the desire to save his sister and the primal instinct for survival. But Lily's eyes met his, and in that moment he saw the truth: she had never succumbed to the cult's darkness. She had been fighting them all along, waiting for the right moment to strike. With a final, anguished look, Oliver turned and fled, stumbling through the forest as the sounds of battle echoed behind him. Branches tore at his face and clothes, but he didn't stop running until he burst from the tree line, gasping for air on the edge of the cemetery. In the distance, he could see the lights of the town, a beacon of safety and normalcy. But as Oliver staggered towards them, he couldn't shake the feeling that a part of him had been left behind in that dark mausoleum, forever entwined with the horrors he had witnessed. The police found no trace of the cult or the mausoleum when they searched the woods the next day. But Oliver knew the truth. He knew that somewhere out there, Lily was still fighting, still holding back the darkness that threatened to consume them all. And he knew that one day he would have to return to Raven's Hollow Cemetery and finish what he started. For in the end, the only way to truly escape the ghosts of the past is to confront them head-on, no matter the cost.